Dr. Sonia bin Ja'far, CEO of الله, الغرير Foundation for Education. You are welcome at أولا الاقتصاد والأعمال, and thank you so much for giving us this opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to speak.
Dr. Sonia, it is well known that coronavirus pandemic have affected the whole scene, and it accelerated e-learning. So what does Abdullah Ghureir Foundation do to support universities and governments in the Arab region to ensure they are well positioned to transition to online and blended learning effectively?
Thank you. The foundation has been working in the online learning space since we were established pre-corona. So we have a little bit more experience than those who have gotten on board with it recently. And one of the flagship programs that we've had is the Open Scholar program, which provides full scholarships to over 600 students for postgraduate degrees and credentials at Arizona State University and MIT. We also work to build the capacity of leading universities across the region and the UAE to offer high quality online education that's specific to the needs of the region. And so the white paper that was just released is an example of that collaboration with MIT, the American University of Cairo, and the American University of Beirut. We also support government efforts to recognize, accredit, and ensure the quality of online courses and degrees. And we support research, knowledge, and resource sharing to operationalize innovations in the online learning space in the region. So it's always in the region, that's where we work.
Okay. After 1 year of adopting e-learning, what has been the experience of students transitioning to online learning as a result of the pandemic?
Well, I want to preface this by saying that the majority of the experience has not necessarily been online learning and education as we envisioned it, but more of emergency response teaching in an online environment, given the pandemic and the quick response. So when most universities in the region transitioned to online learning, we surveyed our scholars who were studying in person at 15 partner universities across the region, in addition to our open learning scholars who are pursuing online master's degrees at Arizona State University. And we asked them about their experience. And overall, they really reported that the key challenges were that there was a lack of interaction with their classmates, that they felt a lack of motivation to study online as it was new and it was challenging. And over half of them reported that there was weak internet connections in their homes. And so these are challenges that really surfaced. And we observed three key trends as well, particularly when dealing with the underserved youth across the entire region that are tied to those pieces. So the first is that the digital divide is exacerbating the education divide. So half our scholars had their learning disrupted. They evacuated their accommodations, they returned home. As you can imagine, we give scholarships to the most underprivileged. And so, having to work from a Wi-Fi connection at home, you're not looking at, a multiple room home where they get a private study space. There's a lot of challenges for where they were to try and figure that out. There was also a key trend was that we needed to look at the well-being of our students. They needed a lot more attention. A lot of them reported struggling with stressful situations and financial changes because of the pandemic. So homes that had lost the primary breadwinner's income had been impoverished. And so they just were not coping well with those greater stresses. And so assuring that we were able to try and build up some community around that and tracking around that was helpful. And finally, one of the trends that we see now is that we're expecting the work experience to be integrated into the solutions. And another unfortunate outcome has been that many scholars have had their internship and professional plans put on hold. So we increased our efforts to connect them with the corporate sector, like McKinsey, Unilever, the Malia Group.
Okay, how does the readiness for universities and schools differs between one country and another in the MENA region?
Oh, it varies greatly. So the first thing is, again, I'll repeat it. It was emergency remote teaching, and a lot of universities simply didn't have the capacity in the region to absorb all these changes. And then other countries were actually quite well prepared. Our partner universities across the region and abroad felt very positive about pursuing online learning in the future. They were able to address the stopgap solutions, but they also were well resourced. They could promote the technology and infrastructure. They can improve it. The universities in the UAE have that technology. The American University of Beirut has that technology. The American University of Cairo had it. And so a lot of it, boiled down to, did they have the technology platform? And multiple universities had better technology than they realized. So they had been investing in it. They were able to do their conference calls. They had internal learning management systems. But one of the issues was that their faculty wasn't ready. So they had never been forced to use those systems. And so really preparing your faculty in a quick manner was a logistical challenge, but a lot of universities, rose to that challenge. And part of the reason they did that is because they worked together across the countries and across different institutions with NGOs and different people who are interested in helping. And so we have synchronous lectures, pre-recorded videos, PowerPoints, and all of these other interactive modular pieces that came to life. And that was in no small part due to the faculty really stepping up where they were given that chance. Typically, what we would have expected is, a months of collaboration between faculty, instructional designers, assessment people. That's how you built it, but they didn't have that opportunity. So that was really hard for them. And then the other piece is trying to get their students to get prepared, because the students were unprepared. So when you teach online, it's not I lecture and then now I'm lecturing with a Zoom. That's not online education. It's supposed to be much more interactive. It has a lot of different components that demand that students actually engage. When you're in a 600 room lecture hall, you can hide very easily as a student. When you have online learning in an appropriate way, the students can't hide anymore, and you need to engage. And there's a lot of student-centric approaches, and some of the students just were not ready for that. And the lack of community feeling, they were feeling stressed because of COVID, they had a lack of motivation. So students were a little bit unprepared. But again, a lot of them rose to that challenge, and they galvanized support around each other.
Okay, what about the curricula? Is there any adjustments were required to shift into e-learning?
There was, and I think that they have been working hard on that. So in terms of the emergency response, they were really looking at what are the core pieces that we need to do? How are we going to help catch up students? Those pieces had been put at the foreground. I know faculty members who have gotten together and really thought through what it is that they're going to put online and how they're going to do this. In some cases, in some universities, and this is what I was talking about, that variety across the region, is they just expected students to be able to just continue on as is. In terms of the foundation and our partners and the people we've been working with, over the summer, we had asked our universities, how that had been coming to fruition and how they had been working on. And they had been really working together at departmental levels to figure out how they were going to assure that students would be ready for their assessments and that the core learnings were there.
Okay, Abdullah Al-Ghurair Foundation has conducted a study with MIT about blended learning. What did this study show?
Well, the study was a result of a collaboration project that we had done. So the collaboration idea was really came up in 2016. At the time, the foundation wanted to push an idea and recognized the need and potential for the Arab region to embrace high quality online learning. And this was 4 years ago. So we started in a context pre-COVID where there was a lot of widespread negativity about online learning in the region, unfortunately. And we were acutely aware that we wanted to be part of that paradigm shift. So that's one of the reasons we selected MIT, because they're a leader in online learning. It was the first time they were going to launch a micro credential, like a MicroMasters. So we found that MIT aligned with our commitment, as did the American University of Cairo and the American University of Beirut, in terms of their desire to kind of go down that. So all of us together, did a design camp. There was faculty, administrators, designers, they all worked together, and they successfully were able to launch that. This study is a reflection of what happened, the lessons learned from that. And so one of the pieces that was learned from it was that in work together, the AUB and AUC faculty and instructional designers, they didn't only learn from MIT. They didn't learn just from the trainers, but they also learned from one another across the institutions and within the institutions. So the exciting part about that is that if we do set it up appropriately, we know that there's a lot of local talent and local knowledge that can be used to design projects and improve things collaboratively. The other piece is that even of the participants that were resistant to the model at the beginning, by then they had embraced blended learning completely, and they were really committed to pursuing it in the future. And in fact, a number of them have come back to us and have been very grateful that they got that experience. When the pandemic hit, they were better prepared to transition to that online environment. The really surprising piece was that faculty faced resistance from students. So we had kind of maybe an image, or many people have an image, that the students are all excited, they want to do everything online. But in fact, it wasn't necessarily the case, because as I said before, the students are not used to playing an active in their learning. They're used to being spoon-fed information. So, it took time and support and then pushing a little bit the students to come around to adjust to these changes. And so what that did teach us was, as we do engage to try and push this agenda, the students need to be part of that stakeholder group consultation. They need to be part of the process so that they understand what their role is and their perspectives and experiences are integrated so that we can adjust the pedagogy to ensure success.
Okay, Abdulaziz Al-Ghurair Refugee Education Fund, which is managed by Abdullah Al-Ghurair, has allocated a huge budget to secure education as provided for a wide range of children. What can you tell us about this initiative?
So, as you mentioned, it was created by His Excellency Abdulaziz Al-Ghurair in 2018, and the target at the time was to support 20,000 refugees to access secondary, vocational, and tertiary education. It is an award that's grants based on a competitive selection process. And so we work with organizations who work directly with refugees and vulnerable youth in the UAE, Lebanon, and Jordan. So it's very localized to those 3 countries. Currently, we have 11 key partners who work directly with refugees. And to date, we have on our record 22,000 children and youth receiving critical educational opportunities. And we're really proud of that number because we still haven't launched the round 3. And as you can see, 22,000 is bigger than 20,000. We've already exceeded our targets. And that is in no small part due to the fact that we do work with partners on the ground who actually had very successful programming that needed to be scaled up, and that we adopt as a foundation an outcomes-focused philanthropic approach. So we value the partner, but we also value outcomes. And so what that means is that every project is impact-driven. We collect data, we have evaluations that are continuous, we explore solutions, we're agile. What it also means is because our model is a little bit different than others, our partners don't look at us as a donor. they look at us as a partner because we need to work together. We're not on the ground and they're not in our shoes having a landscape view. So the combination of the communication really helps us. And so I'll give you an example. When the pandemic struck, we engaged in practices that secured the beneficiaries we had. They were at higher risk because of the pandemic, and they needed to shift to online spaces from the community spaces that they were working in, and they needed to do it quickly. We have budgetary demands in terms of reporting and in terms of following budget lines. Our partners immediately came to us with contingency plans and said, we need to move budget lines. And it was a back and forth that happened within 2-3 weeks, and we were able to secure the funding and the changes. And we did that because we trust our partners. We use professional accountability models. We don't impose and say, well, you said you would do this, or we're cutting your funding, which has been the case. And in fact, really beautifully, one of our partners on the ground was talking to another person who reported it back to me. They said it was wonderful to have open communication channels, that they were comfortable telling us their challenges. They weren't afraid of us because they didn't think that their funding would be compromised. They knew that we would help them find a solution. And so that is what I consider results focused and allows for those grantees and the beneficiaries to benefit all around.
Which countries did it benefit from this initiative?
Jordan and Lebanon primarily, and then we have some vulnerable youth who have been given special status in the UAE, who we also help to assure their education.
Okay, back to e-learning. What are the main challenges that would face this way of learning?
Oh, there's a few. I think, as we think about it, I would say one piece of it is I think that actually we can leapfrog infrastructure changes. In the region, we have some key related challenges, and it's hard to kind of diffuse them a little bit and take them apart. Historically, there's been a restricted growth of online learning in the Arab region. We've had a lack of government accreditation for online learning in the region that has continued. In the UAE, we've had some luck. Last year, the ministry offered a standards document that allows for the accreditation of fully online degree programs. I believe that Egypt is also on that road, but I have gotten calls from several governments around the region asking, how are we going to accredit this? We need to do this now. But before, there was a lot of resistance around it. And the reason there's been resistance is really about concerns around the quality of online programs. They're not resisting to resist. The resistance has been concerns around quality and assuring quality for these kids, these students, these young people, and their families, shifting that perception that was quite negative of online learning. And I think the one thing that has happened with the pandemic is that has definitely shifted. And then the final piece, which ties all this together as well, is that we have a digital divide that needs to be addressed. And so I feel like in terms of what has happened over the last few months is all of us together were kind of thrown into the deep end of the pool. Right? We had to swim in this new online learning space, or we sink. That's it. And because we were all there was an allowance to be vulnerable, to say, I don't know how to do this. Do you know? Does she know? Does he know? Can we help each other? And I think that has shifted our entire mindset to be able to say, can we use each other's knowledge and move this e-learning thing forward? So in terms of how we're going to move forward and addressing those challenges, I think one of the biggest pieces is going to be saying we all care. So the corporate sector needs to get responsibly involved. The regulators need to get responsibly involved, because if you're a rural youth who happens to be really good at engineering and math and STEM, but you happen to be in a rural area and you happen to live in a poor family, why is it that you don't get the chance to go to the American University of Beirut's engineering faculty, right? That needs to be fixed. And that means the digital divide needs to be fixed. We are working with the American University of Beirut to get them to provide that program online, that degree program online. Once that happens, it's going to be very exciting because now that barrier is going to be lower, right? If you're in a rural area and you have the ability, you will be able to access it even if you can't physically access the campus because it's more costly. And so all of those pieces have to come together, which means governments, regulators, universities, and corporates need to work together to combine.
Yes, well, finally, what is your big picture vision for the future of e-learning, briefly?
I think that we have a new generation who will have greater demands from higher education. We will see an increase in efforts to assure that demand is met with quality. And we'll see a diversity of offerings from universities, like we see now, who are adopting it, but we'll also see alternatives. You know, we're already seeing different models like Coursera, edX, edrak. These are online platforms that are bringing together alternatives. Corporates are getting involved. We will see stackable course credits across different institutions that are accredited, so that that old historical model of, well, I have to now stop everything I'm doing, go 4 years to university so that I can then start working. I think that's going to be quickly becoming a thing of the past. We're going to have expectations that students will work as they go and start learning more skills-based learning as well as just technical learning and soft skills. And all of that is going to require a lot of collaboration from the different stakeholders.
Okay, thank you again, Dr. Sonia, for giving أولاً اقتصاد الأعمال this opportunity.
Well, thank you very much for your interest in the foundation and our views.